Hey, everybody, it is Trags Mike Petraglia back with another episode of the JungleRoar podcast powered by the FanDuel Sportsbook, the official wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network. I am pleased to welcome back, and it's been a while, my next guest, Ben Baby of ESPN, covering the National Football League and your Cincinnati Bengals for ESPN. Ben, I want to get right to it. Because we have all of the answers, I want to know what is wrong, what exactly is wrong with the Cincinnati Bengals offense?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we asked Zac Taylor that. And I think it's the one thing we've been probing for over the last few days. And for me, Trags, it's actually I think pretty simple. I think this offense, this whole franchise goes as Joe Burrow goes, and
Yep.
right now he is just not comfortable in the pocket. You look at it, I think that whether it's definitely the calf injury, but I think that he's just not confident in the way he usually operates, and you can see that in the way that the offense looks. He's not able to push the ball downfield. Our friend Richard Skinner the other day said they're playing offense in a phone booth in the press box, and it's a very good point. And so
Very.
I think that's really what we're looking at right now is that until Burrow ends up becoming better, this offense is going to continue to struggle, and the team as a whole is going to struggle because the defense cannot be on the field as much as they've been. And you saw that, I think, in the second quarter, whenever it looks like the Bengals started the game well, even defensively. But once the offense started to sputter and the defense was on the field, everything went downhill. It's almost like there was no reprieve for
Mhm.
them. And then by that point, the game was over. And I think that it's not just a one game issue. I think this is a thing that we've seen over the course of the season, and that whenever they are playing well, the offense is at least able to stay on the field for a certain stretch. You cannot, go 3 and out as often as you do, not move the ball for a quarter and allow a team like Tennessee to just go, like any team really, because Tennessee's not that good. But allow any team to be able to do that and just keep their offense on the field and wear you down and end the game by halftime. So I think it all starts with Burrow, and we'll see if he will somehow find a way to get better and get healthier at some point this season.
So, Ben, to me, what made Joe Burrow so great in 21 and last season? And I think, and I'm asking this rhetorically, it's the way he sees the field. And he is as smart a quarterback as there is out there when he's seeing the field properly. And he beats so many teams based on the way he got linebackers or safeties to bite and move and leverage and throw to the opposite side or the weaker part of the leverage. He's not doing that now. And I spoke to a quarterback, former quarterback, on Monday, and he said, the calf is a symptom. His vision is the problem. And I'm like, what do you mean by that? It sounds great, but what exactly do you mean? And he says, when you don't have mobility, your first instinct is to get rid of the ball as quickly as you can because you know you're not mobile. Well, what does that do? It limits your ability psychologically or mentally, and subconsciously is really the word I'm looking for, to read the entire field. Burrow's not reading the entire field, at least the way it looks on film to me. And you certainly watch a lot of film and you watch a lot of dots. And I know you do, Ben. It's one of your favorite things to do inside and outside the press box. He's not seeing the dots as well this year. I think that can be said without any hesitation. Do you agree with that? And how do you fix that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and you look at it, and it's something that Burrow has taken. His processing ability is almost a
Right.
superpower,
That's the word.
and it's not, and it's he's not processing nearly as well as we're used to seeing for whatever reason. I don't know if it's because of the calf, and he just does not feel confident. But it just I think all in all, he is not comfortable. He's not the same quarterback that we've seen. I mean, you talk about a guy who's taken a lot of pride in his completion percentage and entered the year as the most accurate passer in NFL history, and more. And when you look in the advanced stats, Burrow's off-target throw percentage is always near the lowest in the NFL, and that is not the case this year. So not only
Mm.
is he not reading the field well, he's missing on throws that he normally does not miss on. And I thought really the turning point of that game against Tennessee was the almost pick six the Titans had near the goal line,
Early
because
on.
it was a
Yes.
very uncharacteristic throw because Burrow did not see the linebacker that was lurking, and that should have been a pick six. And then if you go look at the Bengals were driving up until that point, it looked like they were going to get in the end zone. The offense was going to get on track. then all of a sudden the Titans, they end up almost coming away with the interception. And it was just that a guy was in zone coverage that Burrow did not see and account for. And he got away with it in that moment. But after that, that's when we saw the timeout. That's when we saw them go into the 2 plays at the line, and he checked into the RPO. And then ever since that play, the offense did not look nearly as good. I mean, that is a very that is a kind of a fracturing point in the game for the offense.
Right.
And so I think that goes back to your point of, maybe he is not seeing the field as we're used to seeing. And why that's the case, I think only he knows.
Yeah, well, they got to get that figured out, Ben. And that really leads to my next point. Joe Burrow is not playing the kind of football that we've seen from him in the last 2 seasons. Zac Taylor and Brian Callahan, it's up to, and Dan Picture, it's up to those 3 gentlemen to figure out something that is going to get Joe Burrow 2 things: more confident, more comfortable. And he has neither right now. And what do you think Zac Taylor, Brian Callahan, Dan Picture are talking about based on the way this organization and the offense and how they've run in past? What are they going to do to get Joe Burrow in more of a comfort zone?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if you can't do, because of the mobility, you can't ease things on him. You can't roll him out. You can't, maybe eliminate one side of the field, give him more open windows. That makes it tougher based on the way that their offense is structured. It's hard to see what they could do aside from maybe running the ball a little bit more and going from there. Maybe you try more screens if teams are going to blitz. But what's interesting is that it's something that has came up in recent weeks. You remember in 2021, one of the defining moments of that season was against the Jaguars, and Joe checked into a coverage option based on a 0 blitz that he saw. And
Yes.
remember, he yelled, "You can't zero me,"
Right.
in that game. Well, now teams are zeroing him. And that's the issue, is that teams did not throw out a 0 blitz. They did not want to give these receivers one-on-one coverage with no help. Now teams are banking on the fact that they're going to be able to do that. So what's the check away from that? Do you just throw it up and say, go make a play and go from there? I think that's the thing, is because that's on Burrow as well, to make that check at the line of scrimmage, knowing that it's a 0 blitz. When you look at how this offense is structured, the quarterback is always given, even when Andy Dalton was the quarterback is given all the tools at the line of scrimmage to go through and make the decision as they see fit, whether it be based on the numbers in and out of the box, based on the coverage formation. We know that they have multiple plays that they can go with in the line of scrimmage. Based on that, we know that they have a lot of RPO looks that Burrow does not hand the ball off in. He throws out of them, so he has that option. So I wonder if maybe one of the things is maybe you have to just simplify the offense. Just say, listen, you're just going to have to do this no matter what the play call is. And we've seen over the years, Zac Taylor has said that Burrow has gotten them out of bad play calls and into good play calls. And Zac has given him a lot of credit in that regard. But right now, what is the option and availability for you to get out of some of those play calls if your quarterback can't move or is not able to be comfortable and confident the way he normally is to get into another play call? So I think that may be the simplest issue. I don't know if that's a great answer, how feasible it is, but it may just have to be like we saw with the running game last year. When things are maybe a little too complex, it may just have to be simplified for better or for worse.
So the great lead into my next point, and that is one of the big things last year, and I tweeted about this on Monday. One of the big things the Bengals did last year is they went from the stretch scheme, the stretch zone read, to a gap scheme. The Bengals need to make a similar adjustment this year, and it's up to the coaching staff to figure that out. And I don't know what that is per se. Maybe they put Joe under center more, but if they're going to run, he's got to actually take steps back and get into either a passing mode or hand the ball off. So maybe maybe that puts more stress on the calf. I don't know, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And sometimes it can be limited success as well, because, the gap scheme worked for them for a few weeks last year in the run game. But then towards the end of the year, the run game kind of regressed, even though they were in the gap formation. And there's a lot of, when you talk to running backs, it's a lot of, differing opinions on whether it's easier for the zone to be in a zone scheme or a gap scheme. And so I talked to Frank Gore, a while back, and we had a lively conversation about that. And he believes that gap is for tougher running backs and zone is not. And so it was an interesting conversation. And, I've always been of the belief that gap is probably simpler for a running back because you are it's an assigned gap and you're supposed to hit it. So I don't know what the equivalent of that is for a quarterback. Maybe you say, you know what, we're only going to take away the number of routes available on the field, go into heavier formations. You may not need to run the ball, but if you only have, if comfort and confidence or whatever the case may be is an issue, maybe going into 12 or 21 personnel, putting multiple running backs or tight ends on the field, shrinking the field to a degree and only giving him, one or two route options to go with and saying, if we're going to do it, this is going to have to be what we do. That may help ease things out, give him less things on his plate and say, okay, this is the one thing we're going to do. It's kind of a dumbed down version of an offense, but it also could help, with if there are processing issues, if he's not seeing the field as well, this could help him until he gets the confidence back to be a fully functioning quarterback, which right now he just not is. So, this is not a knock on Burrow as a person or as a quarterback. It's just that he's not the full version of himself, because when he is, as we've seen over the last couple of years, he is one of the best in the NFL. So right now, everything that we're seeing is atypical, much like the numbers we saw at the beginning of last year were atypical when he was coming off the emergency appendectomy.
Well, I think the Bengals need to transition a bit into what the Baltimore Ravens and Cleveland Browns are when they play the Bengals. And that is, you limit the possessions, make the most of it, grind up clock, which I actually thought, Ben, on that first drive of this game on Sunday, that to me is what the Bengals should become. Short tosses, move the ball down the field, and Mixon looked like a top tier 5, 6, 7, top 7, top 8 running back. They don't need him to be Nick Chubb, right? They don't need him to be 100 what Derrick Henry was on Sunday, but they do need him to get a first down on 3rd and 5 with a 6 or 7 yard run, or on 3rd and 3, bang out a 5-yard run. And they were doing that. And then they, for whatever reason, got away from that. The execution wasn't there following that. And I guess my long-winded rambling point here is the Bengals need to be more of what they were before Zac didn't go for it on 4th and goal on that first drive. They need to be that more if they're going to protect Joe Burrow.
Yeah, I could definitely see that being the case. I think that, the Mixon is an interesting point, because I think he's having a phenomenal year. I think he's running really well. I wonder if all the conversation about him potentially being no longer good enough to be a running back in this offense, not being worth the investment, I wonder how much of that has fueled him. So I'll leave that to you to ask that question of him maybe at some point this year, because I won't be doing that. But I think that there's a lot of credit that Mixon should get, because he's playing, I think, some of his best football this year. You look at his ability to get chunk plays, really reel off big runs. He's running really hard. I think that is a big difference for them. And I think that there's still some room for Mixon to be better at, for sure. But, if he's able to run the ball that way, then you're correct. Then you're able to have a better offense. And quite frankly, the offense needs to be on the field more. Like it is what it is. Even if you can at least run the ball and move the clock, that's a little bit better than, playing a game where you're going to have a lot of incompletions. You're going to be off the field and you're going to leave your defense on the field for an extended amount of time. I think there has to be a balance there. And listen, I get it. I like the way that Zac Taylor views the game. It's kind of the way that I was raised, and you spread them out. You let your quarterback sling it around, and then you let them operate. You let your skill players, particularly, wide receiver and quarterback, go make plays and really be lethal in space. And, but if you can't operate that way, then sometimes you have to do it a little bit differently. And we see other teams around the NFL do that. And I think that's the thing, is that you have to come to, is it a matter of coming to a realization that this is not going to be what the Bengals thought it was going to be? Burrow is still not healthy enough to do whatever he needs to do, no matter what anybody says, until we see differently. There's going to need to be some honesty about who is capable of doing what, and whether Joe, should he take more time to rest and be healthy? Because here's the thing. We still have not seen as bad as 1-3 is, and as bad as 1-4 might be, the worst possible scenario for the Bengals this season is that Burrow not only does not get healthy, but he comes up with a more serious injury because of whatever happens, and if he's compromised in any sort of way, and then he suffers something that's season ending, that's the last thing you need, because he's already had one of those in his career. And at a certain point, your body can only take so much. And I think for me, that's the one thing that I would be cautious of, is that, you've got this guy signed up long term. He's one of the few quarterbacks in the NFL who's capable of playing at a true championship level. And so why risk it? Even if that means this season is not a playoff season, as tough a pill as that may be to swallow, if the window is indeed Joe's career, then they need to operate like the window is whole career.
Speaking with Ben Baby of ESPN, covering the Cincinnati Bengals in the National Football League. What year is this for you, Ben, on the beat?
It's my 5th year.
Wow. You've seen a lot of good and a lot of not so good at the beginning. I want to get back to the offense. Move away from the offense and not absolve by any stretch the defense. Lou Anarumo spoke on Monday. 12 missed tackles. Was that the number that they counted on Sunday in Nashville? That's a lot of missed tackles. And yes, Joe Burrow could be better. I would normally, Ben, say put more of the onus on the defense. Right now, you can't do that, because I think the defense is breaking down. And Sunday was a classic example of that. You're going to be without Cam Taylor-Britt for who knows how long, because he's in concussion protocol. He also banged up his shoulder in the first half, I believe it was. Long story short, the Bengals defense has to be better. They are not stopping the run. And DJ Reader was very frank after the game, Ben. He said, look, some guys are just not committed right now to the little details it takes to play good defense and to wrap up and tackle.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and it's kind of stunning. I felt like my midweek story aged like milk, because I'd said that DJ Reader had been great against Derrick Henry, and the rushing numbers were fantastic, and Derrick had never rushed. Really had a big 100-yard game against them. Against DJ, always been in the NFL. Well, that ended up happening on Sunday, but you look at it, and I think that it's not just Reader, but it's everybody else, and I think that there does need to be some conversation as to why the defense is not the way it should be. I think that there's a lot of, factors that could be coming into play, whether people want to, admit it or not. I asked somebody on staff yesterday, I said, is it a matter of the defense just being on the field and the offense getting a reprieve? And they said, no, whenever the defense is on the field, we feel like we should be able to get a stop. So it doesn't matter that, what's going on the offensive side of the ball. If we're on the field, we need to be able to do our jobs. And there wasn't a sense that mentally in that game on Sunday that they were wearing down, like we saw them. That's what it appeared to us in the press box. It didn't feel like that on the sideline. But that being said, it did look like that in week 1 against Cleveland as well, when the offense couldn't move the ball, and eventually the Browns were able to get a lot of chunk plays on the ground in certain drives. So I'm not sure what the answer is. I'm not sure if it's if guys are out of position. It seems like players are in, I've seen versions of this defense that have been bad where guys are not in the correct gaps. That doesn't seem to be the case when I look at the tape. I think it's a matter of guys just not making plays when they're there to be made. And so why that's the case, who knows? And that's something that needs to be fixed and addressed. And when we saw it could just be as simple as the offense being good, because whenever the offense was effective against the Rams, we saw the defense play well, as well. And I think there's not just a physical toll of being on the field a lot. There's a mental toll that comes with being on the field a lot and knowing that you're going to have to carry the team. And eventually over time, that's a hard way to play football.
Defense is a lot about discipline. And I'm going to point it to that one play, the Dax Hill play, which I do think was, after watching it, a legitimate penalty. You can't do that on 3rd and 15, Ben. You cannot at the critical point of the game where the Bengals have one more chance to get in. They're down 24-3. They're about to get off the field to start the second half and give the Bengals a chance to get something going offensively, and you commit that kind of penalty. Bad.
Yeah, Trags, it's interesting. I've thought about this over the last, couple days and really the last couple weeks. There is a sense of a lack of focus that we are not used to seeing. A lot of pre-snap penalties, a lot of guys like, Zac Taylor said it best. It's a lot of guys, it's not always one person who has
Mhm.
something going on, but it's, some days it'll be, like in week 3, we had all the false starts. It was, Tyler Boyd, it was Joe Mixon. There were other, defensively, other players were seeing commit penalties that we're not used to seeing. As simple as Tyson Anderson blocking the back, that was clearly a penalty as well. And that was not
Right.
so it's across the entire team. We are seeing just mental lapses. So it's not just the defense, it's not the offense. That's the one thing I'm not really sure why that's the case, because you're not used to seeing that from this team. I mean, is it as simple as they're just kind of discombobulated because of the Burrow injury? Is it hard for them to kind of maybe stay at a certain level of success after being so good the last couple of years? Quite frankly, if we're going to kind of boil it down to a maybe more rudimentary level, is it that guys have now, especially on the defensive side of the ball, all those players are now proven, have long-term deals? Is there a sense of complacency that maybe has crept in? Because that can happen from time to time. But there are maybe bigger issues that we need to look at. And if the team
Yeah.
continues to lose, those will be exposed over the course of the year. And this could be a very interesting inflection point for this franchise if things do not go well.
Well, there's no question about that. And look, if things don't go well, there are going to be voices in that locker room that talk and that are going to say things that they want out there, because when players when a team doesn't do well, there are players who will be frustrated and say, look, for the betterment of the team, I'm going to keep my mouth shut. But if it goes real south and there are players in that locker room that decide something needs to be said to get the message out there that what's going on in our locker room is problematic, and we better nut up or shut up. And I think we're approaching that point. If they lose in Arizona, you're going to see a lot more of what you heard from DJ Reader on Sunday from other players in that locker room.
Oh, I think so. I mean, you're seeing a sense of frustration starting to build, and especially guys who have a lot of pride in being really good. And football is the ultimate team sport, like we know. And whenever one unit on the team is not playing well, somebody else who is good at their jobs all of a sudden is now viewed as not being as good at their jobs. And for people who have a lot of pride, that is not always easy, and you tend to see that when teams do not do well. So I do think that the level of, I am actually surprised at how much people are talking after losses. Last year, there was not a lot of, when we had, when the Bengals lost, there weren't always guys willing to speak after games. In 2020, or 2019, there weren't always guys willing to talk. However, this year, there are guys who are more than happy to talk to us about why things aren't working. It's almost like they're trying to feel it out for themselves and talk to us and find out, yeah, we're not really sure what's going on, but we have not seen that from anybody. So that's a very curious thing. I know
What
Zac Taylor said that everybody responded the right way, but I also was like, oh, it's kind of interesting that everybody's saying so much, which is good for us, and it's also good for the fans. Because at some point you can't run from it. You are what you are, but people are more than happy to kind of maybe diagnose what might not be working.
what did you make of Zac Taylor's comments on Monday about listening to what guys say, namely Jamar Chase? Zac Taylor said he was very impressed with what Jamar said, how he said it, and the fact that he was willing to put it out there and articulate what's going on inside that locker room after a loss. He called that true leadership.
Yeah, I think it was. And Jamar definitely said that. I think Zach's point is spot on about what Jamar said. He said that, he took a good chunk of the blame. He said, I can be better. And he also said he was always open. That is true. He has a lot of confidence, and that's what you want in a guy who's going to be your number one receiver. You want somebody who is one of the best players in the NFL. They want the ball in their hands all the time. And guys are frustrated when they don't play well. And I think that's something that Zach, even going back to 2019 when Tyler Boyd was calling out Ryan Finley or complaining about Zach in the offense or whatever, Zach never got upset because he knew how good Tyler Boyd was. and was not, he knew that that frustration came from a good place. Zac is not going to have an issue with guys talking out in that manner, knowing that because he knows that they want to do everything they can to win. That's very important. But what I gained from Zac's comments about watching all the interviews with us is that he is very much trying to get a sense of a temperature of this team.
Yes,
He is
great
trying to
point.
see what the level of frustration is like and get a
Great
sense of
point.
how to coach the team throughout the week. Because for him, he also, I thought it was interesting, Jeremy Rao, who asked the question, I believe, or it might have been Joe Danneman, one of the guys at Fox 19, but they asked, and Zac said he does not normally watch the interviews after games, but he wanted to after this game. But why would that be the case? It's, if only to gauge the temperature of your team in the moments after loss, see if they are responding the right way. And if you're wondering, maybe, are they beginning to not respond the right way? Is that point coming down the line? And if you wanted to check it and see, that would be my best. That's what I gained from that. So I do think that things are definitely starting to accumulate here. And I think that this is a game the Bengals definitely need to win for playoff purposes, but just in terms of keeping the season together, they cannot. 1-4, it's going to be very difficult, and we may start to see more of what we saw in Nashville, which, quite frankly, was one of the ugliest losses I've seen in the entirety of Zac's tenure.
I called it. I tweeted this toward the end of the game. I don't know if you saw this. I think it was the most alarming loss of the Zac Taylor era. 2019, the roster was bad. Okay, and we all know that. 2020, Burrow gets hurt. It is what it is. They finish, with 4 more wins, with 4 wins, and again, really another lost season. 2021, last year, there were some tough losses, but not alarming losses. I think I wouldn't classify any losses in there alarming. What we saw on Sunday in Nashville, to me, was alarming. Okay, I want to move on real quick to T. Higgins. I tweeted that it was a sign of leadership and courage that he wants to play, but I think somebody needs to step in and say, T, it's great that you want to play, but let the ribs get healthy. Take Ja'Marr Chase's advice, not only from this year on Burrow, but from Ja'Marr Chase on Ja'Marr Chase last year when he went through, obviously, he went through a hip injury, but, he's been banged up in years past with a rib injury. Take your time, get 100% ready, come back when you're closer to 100%. You agree with that?
I will disagree with you on that. I'll be honest.
You think he needs to play if he can play?
I think that he will, based on the response he gave yesterday. And I think with rib injuries, they're unique because the only thing that can get them better is time. And I don't know if in a weird way, based on the way that those fractures occur, as long as you have nothing internal based on the initial fracture, I believe, it will heal over time. And that's why the doctor, he said, basically, there's no risk if he continues to play. It's a matter of how much pain he's willing to deal with.
Correct.
I mean, he can't even sleep on one side. So I think that there's going to be some issues. I think he understands there's a sense of urgency that the team needs to be on the field. And he also knows that he's got to be playing better in order to potentially get a long-term contract from somebody, if not the Bengals, after the season, or if he gets on the tag or whatnot. But I think there's a lot of factors involved, and I'm getting a lot of Jesse Bates 2021 vibes from T. Higgins because it's a guy who is not playing at the level we're used to, and it comes at a time when he did not receive a contract extension. And I call it, and as much as you are saving money, that is also the tax the team pays on not giving somebody a long-term deal. You see how well Jesse is playing in Atlanta now that he has his long-term future secured. For some guys, we talked about some people get complacent whenever they get a contract and they get paid. Sometimes other guys are freer because they know that they are secure and they can go play without having to worry about where their next paycheck is going to come from. And I think that, we see T, it's definitely not the start we're used to seeing from him. I think there's a lot of factors that are involved, but I think that would probably be one of the reasons why he wants to play. And I asked him point blank if he was, if it might be time to make a business decision, and he kind of shrugged that off. But that's something to definitely monitor as the season progresses.
What do you think happens in Arizona? How do they come out? Do they come out desperate and more like what we saw against the Rams, or do they again come out? And you've seen the Bengals do this so often over the last 3 years, even in success. They feel out the game in the first quarter and a half, and then they turn it on. What are we going to see?
That's a great question. I think they have to come out and be desperate. If not, then that's going to be even more alarming because you can't go 1-4 At this point, like Joe Burrow said it best: if they keep playing the way they are not a playoff team. And you talked about it being kind of the most alarming thing, and kind of the thing that kind of touched on that comes to mind as we go through this conversation and talking to you now, and then I think the reason it's the most alarming loss is it's for the first time there's really no hope that it's going to be better moving forward. Because in 19, you had hope that Joe Burrow would come in, transform the franchise. In 2020, you said, okay, he's eventually going to be good. There's hope that at some point, even if it's not now, it is going to look like it did in 21 and 22 when they were Super Bowl contenders. But now there is the only hope is that Burrow eventually gets healthier, but
Correct.
there's no indication that's going to happen anytime soon. And if all your hopes are on him and he is not well, then what do you do from there? And I think that's kind of why this is going to be, there aren't any good answers, because for the last 5 years, even when Joe Burrow wasn't here, Joe Burrow has always been the answer. And now he is the problem and is in not being healthy enough to be lead a good offense. And I think that's kind of why you see a lot of the lack of answers, the amount of questions. And so you have to come out on Sunday, if you're the Bengals, with your backs against the wall and show that there is hope that they can figure this out. Because otherwise, like we've talked about, this could be a long year.
No one is gaining fewer yards a game through 4 games. It's 4 games. It's just under a quarter of the season than the Cincinnati Bengals. They are gaining 236 yards, I believe, a game overall, dead last in the National Football League. The Arizona Cardinals, by comparison, Ben, are giving up 374 yards per game. This should be a game, and that's, I think, 6th worst in the NFL for defense. This should be a game where the Bengals at least get some ability to move the ball up and down the field. We haven't even seen that from this offense enough. And the Bengals need to start showing the urgency, like you said. And I think fans just want to see some semblance of the offense look like it's supposed to look. He is Ben Baby. We're going to wrap it up here. He does a great job covering the Cincinnati Bengals for ESPN. He also, and he would be upset, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention he is one of the best boxing writers on the planet. It is one of his passions. Is that right, Ben? Would you say that's correct?
If you're unfortunate enough to be a boxing fan, it's definitely something that has to be a passion. So yes, I have for better or for worse, it's in my blood. So
do you, by the way, a quick aside, do you regret not being, for lack of a better word, regret not being able to cover boxing back in the heyday, let's say 30, 40 years ago?
Oh, for sure. I think that, having covered a Super Bowl and having covered a big time fight, the energy for a fight is so far superior than that of a Super Bowl. I think maybe you get a conference championship game.
Why is that? Why is that?
The electricity, the buzz. I mean, you see the stars, and the nature of boxing is just, it's when 2 guys are really going at it, trying to win, and you see it all laid out in the ring. It's just I always say, every other sport is just a microcosm of boxing. And so you see it, boxing in its fullest form is kind of one of the greatest sports when it's done well. Unfortunately, it's not always done well by the people who run the sport or the fighters themselves. So that's been a struggle. But yeah, I would have loved to be, even going back earlier, being at some of those great fights, when during the Four Kings era with the lightweights, being at some of the great heavyweight fights of the 60s, even, the middleweight fights, back when people used to put, 80 and 90,000 people into Yankee Stadium and the Polo Grounds, stuff like that. Seeing Dempsey in real time would have been phenomenal. Those were just incredible eras of American sport, and I would have loved to be there to document that.
And one more thing. I'm glad. I bet you are glad that New York State did the right thing and said to Ocho, no. Correct?
Yes, but unfortunately, in our country, there are, if one state says no, you will find somebody who will be more than happy to say yes. So it's just there's a lot of things that we listen, we can go for another
podcast. I know we can't, but
about all this, but yes, that's good. Yeah. Sometimes you need, and going back to our conversation about, I've said, when it comes to pro, sometimes you need great fighters in the ring. And I've told you this in the press box, great fighters, they want to go out on their shield. They want to display their heart. They want to display their toughness. But good cornermen, and when you have good people in your corner, they throw in the towel when they recognize you're going to fight another day. And at what point do we see that maybe with the Bengals this year? If Burrow continues to not play well, say, hey, listen, this is not working. Let's go ahead. Let's take a break and we'll kind of regroup and regather. So right now for the Bengals, it's a strange question, but it might be a more valid question in coming weeks.
He's Ben Baby. I'm Mike Petraglia. Trags, thanks for downloading this episode of the Jungle Roar podcast, powered by FanDuel Sportsbook, your official online wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network. Until next week, keep that jungle roaring.